Have you ever had the experience where you just find somebody online and start to look at their story and you're like, this is crazy, but their story sounds just like my story? Well, as I have been cherry picking experts to have on the podcast, I ran into just this phenomenon. Susan Gold's story is so reminiscent of the things I've shared on the podcast with you, my listeners, about my own life that it was almost uncanny. And the book she wrote, very much in line with things that I'm putting into the book that I'm writing right now. So I just knew from the get-go that I had to have her on the podcast because the very things that I'm telling you to do to step into your own self-empowerment at this stage in your life and just choose what you want, creating a life that you love instead of living a life that you think you should be loving, that you were told, that you were taught and programmed is the best life for you, and just feel like it's coming up short at this point in your midlife. I want you to hear Susan's version of why you should do this and what you need to do in order to get there. So keep listening.
Welcome. This is Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice-divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I have taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started. Quick disclaimer. Today's episode has references to suicidal ideation. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We have a guest on the podcast today, Susan Gold, that I am really excited to introduce you to. So let me read you a little bit about her bio. Susan Gold is magical, navigating ferociously challenging upbringing while braving moving forward as an adult to face ingrained, outdated, and patriarchal programming head on. Listen, you listeners, you know that I talk about this. So Susan is going to share with us her unique perspective in viewing life challenges as occasions for transformation, which I just think is so beautiful. Through her book, Toxic Family: Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom, Susan turns the standard paradigm on its head, courageously leading others through her own journey of abuse, addiction, and surviving narcissism, all while creating a distinctly empowering personal and professional life. So welcome, Susan, to Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving. We love having you here. And I will just start with my very first question that I have for all my guests. Tell us your story. Tell us what brought you here.
Oh, Dr. Natalie, I'm so thrilled to be here with you and with your listeners. I, in preparation, listened to you speak about where you came from, and I identify. We have a lot of similarity in our stories.
I think so.
We could have probably exchanged places growing up, but
exactly.
I was also the middle of 5 children in a very small town in Pennsylvania with 2 geniuses at the helm. But
wow.
An alcoholic astrophysicist, and my mother self-soothed with food. And then they prescribed diet pills, which I realized in
amphetamines.
Straight speed.
Straight up. Yep. That's what it was. Yeah, oh, wow.
A hotbed of mental health, and I couldn't wait to escape. And I did the morning after I graduated from high school. I was 17.
Yeah. Wow.
I, like you, really worried about my 2 youngest brothers that I left behind. I had that guilt complex, but I was determined to make it, and I was envisioning my escape. I would go in the basement on my beanbag chair, on my belly, and watch Barbara Walters, who was an incredible interviewer at the time. And
Yes, one of the best ever. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I wanted to go to New York City and be like Barbara Walters. And eventually I did make it to New York City. I was working at a large global talent agency. They represented everyone that was anyone in Hollywood and in movies at the time and in music. It was a very fascinating place to be, but I couldn't make enough money to pay my bills. So I took up a side hustle training people, exercise training.
Okay.
And Barbara Walters became one of my clients.
What? Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Wow.
And I rang her doorbell, Dr. Natalie, one morning at 7 a.m. She took one look at me and she said, "Susan, get in here. What is going on with you?" She got it out of me within moments. I had been sexually harassed in the workplace the day before by my boss. I had porous boundaries. It was very difficult for me to say no. Inappropriate behavior seemed normal. It seemed like things were my fault. I took an overdeveloped sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
And this horrified me and kicked up so much post-traumatic stress.
Oh, I imagine. Mm-hmm.
And Barbara said, "I'm coming to work with you this morning and we're going to confront this man."
Oh my goodness. Who gets to bring Barbara Walters to work? That is fantastic. Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I think I got it covered. And I went to work and I did confront my boss and he promptly fired me. And
wow.
He said, "Do you have everything you need?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Great, you're fired." And I went to the New York Health and Racquet Club to train out my woes. And realized I forgot a couple of things. Went back. He had already changed the locks on the doors. I was probably not even 90 days sober. Alcoholism runs in my family.
Mm-hmm.
The same red flags came up for me in my early 20s. So, and luckily I got clean and
good for you.
Just extricated myself from a ridiculously abusive relationship where the gentleman held the purse strings, I'm embarrassed to say. And Barbara said, "Come work for my fiance, Merv. He's heading up a film distribution company and he could really use you." And thanks again so much, but I just can't be another assistant after what I've just experienced. So I decided to launch my own talent brokerage firm, matching celebrities to brands.
Wow.
And Donnie Deutsch, who now is an entrepreneur and host and iconic television host, was running his dad's ad agency at the time.
Oh my goodness.
And he wanted Andy Warhol to endorse his Pontiac client. And somehow we were put together and he said, "Do you think you could get Andy?" And I'm like, "I don't know, I'll try."
Yeah.
So I rang the factory. Of course, nobody picked up the phone. So I took the subway down there, knocked on the door, and Andy's business manager, Fred, answered. And I explained why I was there. And he said, "Come back tomorrow and I'll let you talk to Andy." I'm like, okay. So I showed up the next day, sweating bullets.
I'm sure. I'm very sure.
In the foyer, and the double doors opened, and Andy's business manager, Fred, said, "Well, Andy will see now." And it was completely dark in that room. I was terrified to go in. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Wow.
But in I went, and there he was, this master modern artist with platinum hair going 17 different directions.
Yep.
And 3 pugs running around the studio. And
unbelievable.
With colored pencils. And so I just went into my spiel of why he should do this commercial, what it was, what would happen. He didn't listen to any of it. He was really into those dogs. And as a kid, I could intuit other people's emotional state very clearly as a super empath. I was quite telepathic, and I could sense his isolation, his desire to connect, to be recognized, to be noticed, to be a part of, even though he was so isolated.
Yeah.
And finally, he looked at me, Dr. Natalie, in the eyes, and he said, "Now, really, why should I do this?" I didn't know, but out it came. "You can have the pugs in the shot with you."
There you go. Unbelievable. Smart. Smart move.
That launched me into a really amazing career, matching celebrities to brands. And then that led me into producing for television and then film and then on to LA, which I thought was a great career move. But really, it was to meet the greatest guru as in teacher I would ever have. And that was the man who would become my ex-husband.
Ah, okay. The greatest teacher. There's a story there for sure. I want to ask your book. So what prompted you to write the book, or is that part of the story with the ex-husband? Do you want to talk about that first? Are you on my mailing list yet? Because if you're not, you really should be. You want to join at learntoloveyourstory.com. If you scroll down, I'm giving away a freebie for you. Honestly, you know what it is? A free course. I sell online courses, but this is a course just for you. And it's about freeing yourself, letting go of what others' expectations and ideas are for you. You know, that nagging self-doubt in your head, it's usually fueled by your consideration of what others think of you over your consideration of what you think of you. And so I teach you in my video all about what is underlying that kind of self-doubt and how to get out of that conundrum. And I give you a workbook that goes with it that helps you to build the skill sets that you're going to need for that. So please make sure you're on my mailing list, because at the least, you're going to get a free gift. And at the most, you're going to hear about all the things that we're doing on Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving and learntoloveyourstory.com. And you don't want to be missing out on any of the new things that'll be coming your way.
No, I'd love to engage in conversation with you. I love that you ask the questions, because you ask great questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
I listen. So the book, well, I was encouraged to write a book in 2007. An Irish seer said, you have a book to write. And I probably kicked that under the closest carpet. I didn't want to go through writing.
You know, like, I'm writing one right now, so I understand the compulsion to want to put that really far deep under something that you don't have to look at it all the time. Yes, indeed.
In 2020, in the COVID lockdown, I had 2 back-to-back intuitives tell me, you have a book to write. And the third one said, you have 3 books to write. And I thought,
oh my goodness.
Before this turns into some kind of freaking library,
I have to stop asking that question or hearing from intuitives and just start writing. That's what needs to happen. Yeah. Well, wow. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And why this book first for you?
Yeah, I didn't really understand that this was my mission, that this was my purpose. I was living a pretty glittery life.
Yeah.
Outside in. And it was encouraged. I'd been told, you've lived through a lot and people need to hear your story. You're going to be an inspiration. Your resilience is going to help other people. Mm-hmm. And I thought, really? So I was like a dutiful producer. I don't know what your process is, and I'd love to hear about it. But
yeah,
mine was sit at the computer for 15 minutes a day, whether I had something to write or not.
It's a good method. Mm-hmm.
Kind of punishing, though. But it did give me a manuscript at the end of 9 months.
Good.
And I didn't really feel connected to the story, even though it was my own. And
sure.
A very wise mentor said, go back and take another pass from little Susie's point of view. The little
interesting, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That through all this. And that's when I connected with the material. And that's when I felt, oh, there really is something here. I really have had unique experiences. I really have stood up to some pretty challenging circumstances and walked through and seen them with that perspective. Mm-hmm. Opportunities for growth and for beauty and for self-expansion and evolution.
Yes. Yes. Which is remarkable. I mean, given the context of what you have, even just in your little bio about you were in a household with alcoholism, your mom medicated with food, and then of course was given means to deal with that, and the narcissism and all of that, like given the context of what you grew up in, it's hard to write about that, right? It's hard to reckon with it at that kind of really intimate level, which is what, I mean, honestly, it's like writing a diary and then putting it out into the world and saying, hey, everybody read it. Hope you love, like, and then, to recognize in yourself as you went back through it and looked at it that I have this gift. I have this remarkable gift. Well, many gifts. I mean, you've already talked about your empathic capability that I am certain came out of that toxic family system. You have a gift of, though, spinning from the negative and mindset shifting into the positive, into what can be growth, what can be generative from the depths of my despair. How can I kind of expand and grow from this rather than how is this taking me out in this moment? Like that's a real gift. And why do you think it is that, you were the magical amalgam of things that allowed space for that in your life?
Well, thank you for the insightfulness to see that again with the insightful questions, which I really appreciate.
You're welcome.
So I believe, and maybe I spent too many years in Southern California and I'm full of hooey, but I believe I came into this life with a very specific plan that I wanted to play out. And I believe my family members, my challengers, predators, narcissists have played their roles to perfection.
Yeah.
To give me an opportunity to move through these experiences and see them in a new light, because I am now in a place of authentic freedom. What I didn't plan on was my publisher giving me a call like a couple of weeks before the book is coming out to say she was changing the title. My title was Magical Illumination, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom. And she said, there's nothing magical illumination about this. This is about a toxic family system. I thought, oh my God.
I mean, she's not wrong, but it's taking it from your spin on it, and it's naming it as, I have a lot of opinions about the medical model in our world, in our Western culture, and they definitely like to name things and blame shift. And I like how you have this freedom now. Is adult freedom is what you're describing it as, and you really wanted to emphasize that side of it. That's where I'm at too. I'm kind of like, could we call it self-betrayal and self-sabotage? Sure. But I would rather call it empowerment because I want to see where the growth is, where the generativity is. Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's very surprising. Ouch. And hard probably to have stomached that the title was going to shift.
I mean, it's one thing to write a book like that, but then to have it published and under that title.
Yeah.
But I have to give my family members incredible credit. They've treated me with such respect. And we've all had our experiences growing up in that family home, as you have talked about in the past. It's my sister, who's a couple years older. She feels like she had a privileged upbringing, and she almost feels ashamed of it. My oldest brother, with whom I have the most abuse, his childhood is almost a complete blackout. Now, I feel that's from trauma. He feels, I don't, remember. But he read the book and, much to his credit, gave me a call. I didn't even recognize his voice because he's a complete hero. Very stoic. And he said, wow, I can't believe you went through what you went through, and I'm sorry I wasn't a better brother.
Wow.
And I'm really proud of all you've accomplished and the way that you've chosen to walk through this. And why'd you have to do this now?
I mean, I'll give him credit that he gave you a really remarkable compliment from that. I'm sure that came as a surprise to you, the way that you're presenting it. I mean, was it interesting to hear from your siblings, like their perspectives, maybe not just on that you wrote the book, but then on the family system itself? It kind of came out of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard when you come from a dysfunctional system. One of the rules is don't talk, and it's complete denial. So this is really ripping that off. But I had to understand I could not write this book and share this experience by committee. This had to be my own experience from my heart, authentically.
Yeah.
So,
So a lot of my listeners are, women in midlife that are starting to reckon with the fact that they don't love their lives. They might even hate them. It might be a deep, dark secret, and that's not something that they want to just honestly come by yet, but they're kind of in that stuck place. And I would love to hear more about your second huge teacher, your ex-husband, because I do think that for many of us, there's some midlife crisis, if you want to be conventional about it, but there's something pivotal in a midlife transition that we start to reckon with that earlier stuff from our family of origin. We might not have otherwise, right? But what we're realizing is there's clearly a connection between those two. How I was programmed to be as a child and then how I showed up later in my life are intimately connected and not serving me. And so midlife is then like this place where we can step into our freedom, step into our empowered decision-making to choose differently for ourselves. So if you're willing to share, I would love to hear more about it. And I know my listeners would as well.
Yeah. And I want to compliment your listeners to being open to exploring this, because it takes a lot of courage, and I applaud each of you. So my husband, my greatest guru, my teacher, was almost a carbon copy of my father. I thought I finally met my match, my ideal individual, and I was growing even more tired in this relationship. I couldn't speak up. I lost my voice. I was taking care of a Peter Pan, and that's what I had done with my father. I mean, one day I came home from school, my mother's throwing his clothes and his belongings out the second-story window, and I'm picking them up and putting them back in the house. So I was doing the same in my marriage, and we had a son. We were blessed to have a son, but once I had the son, I was taking care of two children. I was basically being a single parent within this circumstance, and I was afraid to ask for help. And I'd almost be punished if I did ask for help.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of integrity when it came to fiscal responsibility, the financials. So I asked my husband, I really wanted this marriage to last, even though I knew it was well beyond the expiration date, and I was crumbling. I was exhausted. I asked him to go to mediation and work out an agreement so there could be some integrity with the relationship. And we got to the last point, and I thought, our marriage is going to be saved. Hooray. And that's when he folded his arms across his chest, and his eyes went in those cold, lizard-like slits. And he said, I'm hiring an attorney and I'm filing for divorce. And the intuitive voice came over my right shoulder and through my heart. And it said, this is the universe doing for you what you cannot do for yourself. Because I just want to say, and maybe someone out there identifies, I knew for a long time that I was carrying way beyond my means.
Yes.
It was to my detriment, and I needed to step up and out. But the fear of abandonment was so great. My friends didn't understand it. Here I was very accomplished. I had bought our home in Southern California.
Yeah.
I had the career. I was making the property taxes, meeting the all the repairs on the home and taking care of. And I was terrified to step out of this relationship, but it was done for me. Well, we left that mediation and went back to our home, which quickly became a domicile, not a home.
Yeah.
This shows who this man was. He took up residence in the master and wouldn't leave the master bedroom. And I, on the other hand, took a mattress across the home into a partial conversion in our garage. And that was the billboard I needed to fall on my head. Here I was. I bought this home. I had maintained it. I was caring for our son. I was caring for the bulk of the bills. And I was on a mattress on the floor in the garage.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I went inward. Talk therapy helped me so much get the storyline down. But ultimately, it led me square back to where I was 25 years later. Nothing had really changed within. And it was somatic forms of therapy, really going in, exploring in the body that shifted me on a cellular level. So I made that partial conversion in the garage a monastery. And I went within and I held no contact because I believe my husband may have been an alleged narcissist. And the more you engage, the more that backfires on me. So I held no contact, and I had been a long time meditator. I went on long-term meditation retreats where there was no talking and there was no eye contact. And I used that tool for the calendar year it took to reach the divorce settlement. I was able to write him his 6-figure check, and he was able to go on to his next victim. And when I describe this scenario, most people say, what are you, whacked? Like, he's your greatest guru? What?
For people who don't see this as something that's an opportunity, the way you're describing it, that's how they respond to that. They're like, what? No, he's awful. Why would he be your teacher? So tell us, why is he your teacher? We want to know.
There were many times that I wanted to speak up and rail against what appeared to be injustice and the lack of integrity. But I needed to be in that circumstance for that calendar year to truly see the authentic identity of this man who I loved and nurtured and supported for a decade and a half. And what it taught me was that I did not live from the inside out. I was living from the outside in to get love. And what had to happen was that all had to fall apart.
Yes.
And I had to stick my neck out on that chopping block and be terrified like I've never been terrorized before.
Yeah.
To go within and to find that piece of love and authenticity within myself that I will protect with all my might now and appreciate. And that's when I really learned self-care, self-love, and how to live from the inside out. And the miracles just keep coming.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And if you can unpack a little bit for you when you say I lived outside in, what does that look like? Because I think I know, or at least I think I know exactly what you're getting to there. And I'm not so sure that all of my listeners do. And maybe the way that you say it might be something that they need to hear.
Sure, Dr. Natalie. And again, thank you for asking.
So
it took me a little bit of time to realize that's what I was doing. But I always went after the best job, and I had to be in the entertainment industry, and I had to be a producer. And then I had to be an athlete. I started marathoning, and then I started triathloning. And then when I couldn't do that anymore, I became a nationally ranked swimmer within 4 years.
Wow.
Always achieving.
Yes.
Outside in.
Yep.
And had to present a certain way to be okay. I had had that man since second grade and Billy Fritz.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the outside in. And
yes.
It's a very difficult, taxing way to live.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
And it's the way we're programmed. Our educational system
absolutely
teaches us. Our religious system teaches us. Even our healthcare system teaches us. And it wasn't until all that was stripped, including my ability as an athlete. I think it was about a year after my husband left and I had taken the house down to the studs. That little conversion in the garage became its own guest suite, and I earned half my mortgage and my taxes and my insurance. Like, life got so much better, but I was still numbing some of the pain of the abandonment through overexercise until I could walk around my block. And I had to take another look.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So there still was some residual ways in which you were trying to escape the pain. And that was one of the ways that you used was over exercising.
Yeah. And I think I'm so grateful that crumbled because I was bludgeoning my body even worse than perhaps it had been bludgeoned in that home that I had grown up with, where there was abuse of every type slathered in every crevice.
Right.
But this is what I knew. Just push on and achieve. And I dive in that pool when it was, 38 on deck and 76 in the water, and just be cold and numb and vulnerable and just keep going.
Keep going.
And you know what? Just do it. No, take that and put it right in the trash.
Well, especially for somebody who is in that performative, external, hustling for your worthiness, that and just do it are toxic together, right? Like, it's just not a way to live. It's a way to be performative and to give away your power to external forces to tell you if you're enough. And so it's a constant hustle that is not attainable. There is not enoughness when externally is the power that tells you if you're enough or not. So the journey really for you is to bring it internal, right? And to become, fall in love with yourself and become fiercely protective in your self-care of the person and the body that you're in, so that you can enjoy a life instead of just feeling like you're that performative being all the time.
Yeah, the gerbil on the wheel. So
exactly.
I got off. And you can too, whoever's
good.
Listening.
What helped you recognize the over exercising, just the not being able to move? I mean, like your body just kind of said, and we're done now. Okay.
I knew, it was insanity. I would, be in the pool at 5:30 a.m. and then I'd be throwing weights, kettlebells in the gym at 9. And then I'd be walking the dog 3 times a day and at hot yoga a couple times a week on top of all that.
Yeah. Wow.
It's enough. And then, you listen when all of a sudden your hip is not cooperating.
No. Yeah. When your body says, and we're done here, like there is no not listening. You just, at that point you have to listen, which I think is another gift of midlife is our margins are real narrow if we have them at all at this point. So you really can't overtax your body. You really can't, you don't have the social currency in beauty and other things to kind of cover things up. And so you're going to have to reckon at some point with, do I want to be on the hamster wheel or do I want to create the rules that make my life worth living?
Yeah. And I'm so grateful I'm on the other side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's just so taxing to live the other way. And it's okay to surrender and it's okay to find peace in other ways. Now I walk, I hike, I'll swim a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to swim, but
yes, but it sounds like a whole different mindset around those, exercises is for self-rejuvenation. Exercise is for self-care. It's not performative. It's not like I have to, if I'm not hurting, then I must not be doing it right, which is a mentality that you can get into pretty easily in our culture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you were on, talking to one of my listeners who's on the other side of this, what's your advice to her if she's feeling kind of stuck and just needs to take that first step?
Well, first of all, it's okay to be stuck. It's okay to be right where you are. And that is part of the process. Mm-hmm. And these addictions, quote unquote, are very difficult to break. But brava for you that you are starting to feel and understand that you are stuck. Mm-hmm. And thank goodness for Dr. Natalie and her podcast, because they are showing you each episode that it is possible to shift out of it. And you deserve support because you have value, you have worth, you have purpose, and you too can walk through this and then help the next person behind you.
Yeah.
Come on through.
I mean, I think that even just the demonstration of choosing you and choosing a life that works for you instead of is performative and externally driven by other people, that itself is a permission slip to anybody that you touch, right? This is why I'm so passionate about helping women in midlife, because I, as a woman in midlife, know very well how many people we touch on a regular basis, and that we have our hands in the pots of taking care of, generations above us, but also younger generations. And so if I can help even one of you, then I can help a lot of you, right? Because I know that becomes a permission slip to other people to start to kind of question some of this programming that we've had. And it really sounds like you, Susan, that's what you are about, is just kind of helping people have that compassionate lens as they're looking at their life, and then challenge a little bit of the programming that has gotten you to where you feel stuck at this point.
Yeah, the programming is vicious. And it does take a little bit of time to wake up to it, but once you see it, there's no going back.
Yeah.
But again, you're in a totally new place. It's not even close to the container you've been living in. You're now on this expansive street with this incredible vista.
Yes. And I really appreciate that you shared with us the other insight that you had after healing about your exercise, because I think it's important for us all to also admit, like, this is an ongoing process. This is a rinse repeat cycle. So you don't get on the other side and now you've arrived and everything will be roses from this point forward. What you've arrived in is a new way, a new lens, a new way of looking at things and behaving and interacting with things. So give yourself permission to keep curious about what isn't serving you, which could be something, hidden in plain sight, like exercise that you thought was self-care, right? Like you didn't realize you were doing something that was participating in suffering for you. And yet the lens that you switched into after that divorce really helped you to be able to kind of reckon with, there might be other ways that I'm still kind of participating in the programming that's not serving me and need to choose otherwise.
And that's the beauty of really facing whatever issue is in front of you. If I could share how much willingness to change, an open surrender to change, to see things differently, to embrace it, to embrace the challengers and the challenges as gifts of evolution and change.
Yep.
It makes life so much more comfortable.
Totally. Absolutely. I'm 100% behind that. And that's really where we should feel comfortable in our life. I mean, it should feel good instead of, what's the next thing on my to-do list. I was coaching with somebody just recently where we were talking about this, like how much as you're making this switch, you do sit in a agitated state. When you're coming from old programming and moving into this new life that you're choosing for yourself, you're going to have kind of some old reels, to date myself, go through your head of, feeling guilty, like I'm taking time for myself, or, this doesn't feel right. I'm not doing things performatively or on the to-do list. I'm just doing them because they feel good for me. So it's okay to be in that change space where there's discomfort there. Discomfort can be our teacher there as well. Like it's just kind of a reminder that we're on the growth edge, that, the old way is kind of knocking at the door going, really? We're not doing it the way that we have done it. And you're having to kind of intentionally get fixed on, nope, I'm going to do it this new way here.
Yeah. It's really an expansive, again, gift.
Yeah. Right.
And then to really feel it and to embrace it. Wow.
Yes. What do you think was one of the biggest challenges for you as far as you say that you knew ahead of having the gift of him asking for a divorce? You knew that marriage was, you knew going into the mediation, probably not like this shouldn't be saved. And yet I'm going to give it my all because I'm doing that performative thing. Tell me what the biggest challenge was for you, pushing past wanting to continue to be performative in that old programming.
Huge fear. Fear of failure. I didn't want a marriage failing with a child involved. I didn't want to replicate what my parents had demonstrated.
Yeah.
I wanted to do things differently. And then the abandonment piece is so to the core of my being that I didn't really want to face that. I didn't want to walk through that. I wanted to be cared for and soothed and supported. And I kept going to the hardware store for that loaf of bread, expecting it's going to be there. And it wasn't.
And it wasn't there.
Major surrender to all of the fear. And it was hell. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
It was really uncomfortable. And the last 2 months of that process, things whipped up, as they often do when you're divorcing someone who may be a narcissist. It whips up because the game is over. The scenario, the jig is up, and they know it, and they get desperate. And I turned the anger inward. And suicidal impulses, ideations started to come up. So I assigned a friend for each day of the week, all 7 days, and I committed to check in with the assigned friend and commit. Was I suicidal? Was I not? Was I okay? If I was suicidal and the person didn't answer the line, I would commit to go to the next person.
Wow. Good for you.
That carried me through the
experience.
So you may have to use some pretty tough tools. I promise you there is support and there are people that understand what you're going through and that can help you through the process.
Yeah, of course. And you shared that therapy was huge during that. And I wouldn't advise anybody to go through a difficult season like that without having great amounts of support around you. So not just go to therapy, but like you said, really tapping in to the social support network that you have, to those friends and family, those people that really love and adore you. And they're going to be doing some heavy lifting during that time. And that calls up guilt for us. And I promise you would be the person on the other side of that if they were going through it, right? So these are those systems where it's not even in any given moment who's getting what at what time, but these are those kinds of relationships where there's always that reciprocity across, and they're giving it to you and you'll be giving it to them, or have at some point.
Absolutely. And if that gives you the courage to move forward, use it.
Use it. Use what you've got. Yes, definitely. Well, my goodness, this has been so lovely. I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better, Susan. And you're right. As my listeners know, this is not unfamiliar territory. This is definitely very similar to the stories that I've talked about on the podcast from my own upbringing. It's so ironic that you're the middle of 5 kids, which is its own little microcosm within the bigger toxic family system. That I'm sure we could delve into someday if you want to come back on. I'm curious, where can my listeners find you? What would you like them to know about what you're doing, what you're up to? And of course, I'll always keep links in my notes so that my listeners can get to you easily.
Okay. Well, you're so gracious. And I just want to put a plug in for your 20-week course that you have.
Thank you. Yes.
And yummy and transformative. If anyone feels called and you feel like you'd like to connect, just go to my website, susangold.us. It's all there. We can have a conversation. And then I'm just nurturing a YouTube channel. So there's lots of free videos there. And I'm sharing my own experience growing up in a toxic family system. So what that really meant and what it means in adulthood by very specific story.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that too, because I think the collective voice of those of us that have been through that healing journey and are sharing it is definitely transformative to the right ears when people have been through this, but just are still in that challenged space where the fear is bigger than they are. And they just, they just need a little hand to pull them across the line, I think. So thank you for doing that as well, for putting that stuff out there, for putting out your book. And I am looking forward to the next two books that the one empath or intuitive said that you need to be writing or getting on top of. But thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It was just a pleasure having you.
It was really lovely to be here, Dr. Natalie, and
Yes.
I hope that your platform expands because you deserve to be seen and heard.
Thank you. Well, I hope it does too, because I want to make sure to help all of my listeners find that centered life thriving.
Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these two crisis resources. They're available to anybody.
Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone,
text HOME, home, to 741-741.
to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.